Hello everybody, welcome to CIS277. I am Professor Bob Hendry, your teacher. And today's date is September 24th, 2020. So hope you're all doing well and welcome to class. Let's get started. Now, we're going to start out with just a couple of like where we're at the class and just kind of like the state of the class sort of stuff, with me just doing a narrative. And then we're going to go into our material. Now, we're about a third of the way through the semester. Now, we went over database scripting, which most of you look like you're kind of finishing up right now. And then we go into Java scripting. Java scripting, I like, even though Java isn't going to be one of the languages or any other languages that we're going to be used as a scripting language. I got that as a couple of emails, and when are we going to use Java, or when would we use Java as a scripting language? And the answer is you can, but more importantly, and this is the point I'm trying to make, is Java and its syntax is the impetus for so many scripting language. Like Spark is one of them. Groovy is one of them. There's Ruby, Groovy, Spark. There's a lot of languages that are out there that are Java-like. Scala is one of them. There is so many of them. So when we're learning scripting languages, or you're in the beginning of your scripting career like you are now, Java is a really, really good place to start, because all these other languages are very Java-like, let alone JavaScript, which actually has nothing to do with Java. So that's where we're at with this. So it's going to help us when we go into Ruby a little bit later, when we go into Python a little bit throughout the semester, and also we might do a little bit of Perl too. I'm not exactly sure, but Ruby is directly on our horizon. Python's on our horizon. PowerShell is too, but PowerShell really isn't Java-like. It's still kind of like DOS, command shell-like. But anyway, that's where Java fits in to this whole thing. And also, what we're doing is we're learning to get familiar with CodingGround, all right? By the way, have I told you how much I like CodingGround? I'm telling you, I don't know where I've been without IDEs like this. Up until, I know I've told you this story before, but up until a couple years ago, every time I would teach something, we would have to download all this crap and install it. And it never worked anywhere except on the machine that we installed it on. So I get all you in front of me. I'm like, all right, everybody, for right now, what we're going to do is we're going to go online and we're going to install blah. So we would install it, we would download it, we would change environment variables, we would have to get elevated privileges to actually be able to install this locally, blah, 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 and it just was a nightmare. And finally, once we got everything up and going, that's all that worked on. You couldn't go home and do it. You have to go through the whole thing again. And someone would raise their hand and go, Bob, I'm using an older version of Windows with Service Pack blah, blah, blah on it. And I'm like, I don't know. I have no idea why it doesn't work. Or someone says, hey, Bob, I got a Mac. Now what do I do? And I'm like, we're screwed. But anyway, where I'm going with this is IDEs like CodingGround really give us an opportunity to try dozens of languages without doing any of this. Love it, love it, love it, love it. So anyway, those are the two overreaching goals of what we're doing here. I want to get you used to using an IDE like CodingGround, so we could go from language to language, from command shell to command shell, from terminal to terminal, from IDE to IDE. It's all right here. It's all right in front of you. Easy peasy, nice and easy, right? So anyway, so that's where that fits into it, and that's where Java fits into it as well. Also, I want to point out to some of you, I know some of you got a little bit of how about this? More than a basic background. I never want to say you have an advanced background, because I don't know. I mean, in my field, or in my background, you don't say you're an expert at anything. You're only an expert when other people say you're an expert. So when people would say, do you consider yourself an expert at something? I always would say, no, I don't. So anyway, with that in mind, I don't know who's an expert here or who isn't. But some of you have mentioned the fact that that Java is used in a lot of scripting as far as like cloud native languages, and that's true, absolutely. Such as if you're doing things such as Cloud Foundry, or you're doing any of the big data Hadoop stuff with Pig or Hive, Java with the JDE, just like it is now, Java 8 is a core language of all of that. So it's in the mix there, for sure. So that's where we're kind of at with this. I know you guys have been doing the X's and O's with this. We've been working either here in our classroom or we've been working online with this. So I just wanted to give you kind of like the backstory to CodingGround Java and what we're doing here, why we're doing it, and it just so it doesn't seem random. Like, oh, Bob wanted to use CodingGround in Java, although no one said that. That's why we're using CodingGround. That's why we're using Java. It's extremely relevant, and it's a helper for everything we're going to be doing later. Like tonight, we're going to be doing functions in Java. So once we get functions down, we're going to be able to do them in Ruby or in Python or in Jaguar if we're doing like client-side presentation languages and scripting. So it's all in there. It's all baked in the cake, right? So that's where we're at with this. So we got 2 more episodes, right? Episodes of Java programming. We're going to have a midterm, and then we're going from our midterm, we're going to go into the last portion or the last half of our class. We're still 3 weeks away. Don't panic. It's in the syllabus. Look at the date. It's in there. Take a deep breath. It'll be all right. So we're right on time as far as scheduling goes. So just keep on doing it. Most of you are working. Well, actually, all of you are still working on your assignments. If you don't know where everyone else is at, if you're done with 2 of them, you're good. If you're done with 3, you're probably a little bit ahead of everyone. If you're done with all of them, you're not in this class because I don't think anyone here is done with all of them. Pardon me, I got to turn off these notifications. If you see them on my screen, just ignore them. Really, they're pretty benign, but they're just annoying. Anyway, so that's where we're at with that. Oh, also with the since we're still talking about class announcements, the midterm most likely is going to be electronic, meaning I will email it to you like I do all the other stuff. It'll be a link and you'll get to do it. So it'll be open book. You're going to be on your honor, though, to actually do it by yourself. It's not a group project. This is the one thing I don't want you to collaborate on. I want you to do it all by your lonesome. But that's going to be posted. I mean, we're still a few weeks away about that. But more about that when we get to it. But I got a couple emails on that about the final. So that's coming. Pardon me, the midterm. The final's coming, too. The midterm's coming. It'll be electronic. I'll post it for you. It'll be fairly simple. It's going to be only on the stuff that we've been covering. I'm not going to ask you even to write really long pieces of code. I might give you code segments, ask what it does. And I might ask you some questions that have to do with our reading. And I'll give you more of the format of it as we go. I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's not worth a lot of points. And your professor being me, Bob, if you're the professor and you know it, clap your hands. Right? But I don't tend to put a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Weight on written exams, especially for hands-on stuff like this. So it's going to be fairly straightforward. It really is. If you've been paying attention, like if you're like within the sound of my voice right now, you have been paying attention, you should do just fine on it. It's just going to be stuff that we covered in class between, we started and into the midterm or so. More on that later. It's not going to be so severe that we're going to have a class that we're going to study for it. It's not going to be so severe I'm going to give you a study guide. Believe me, it's not going to be that bad. The assignments that I give you they're starting to take a little bit more of your time. Those are the ones that get most of your attention. All right, that's where we're at as a class. Let me give you a 10-second sanity break. Let me get a drink of water here, and then we'll talk about what we're going to do tonight. All right, tonight what we're going to do is we're going to go in the CodingGround, and I'm going to show you how you can create a function. Now, we're going to be using Java for now, but we're getting to the point where we're going to start changing the different languages. But this will give you some more experience with CodingGround, just the IDE. Notice that I only spent maybe just a few minutes just on the IDE itself because that's kind of the point. I don't want to get lost in the tool. I want to get into the technology and start writing some code, and CodingGround is an excellent interface to do that. So let's talk about functions for a second. What you see here is you see one function in our Java program, the main function or method. A little bit more about that in a second. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you can create other methods or functions within Java, how we could call them, and a little bit about the syntax. It should be a fairly straightforward lecture. All right, let's get started. What we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to do two things. We have two objectives. The first objective is I'm going to show you how we can declare simple data types and variables in Java. Very straightforward. We're going to take the happy path. By no means is this going to be a comprehensive lesson on declaring variables, but at least it'll get you started and it'll get you some work under your belt so you can move on to some more complicated endeavors with declaring variables. The second objective I have is I'll show you how to declare methods or functions in Java. Now, the main point I'm trying to make is we're using Java kind of as a language to do this, but I want to get you used to declaring variables and then writing and calling functions, because once you can do that correctly, you can pretty much do that in any language. So if you move on to Python, or if you move on to Ruby, if anyone still does Ruby, you're able to declare methods and then call methods. So let's get started. So we're going to start by looking at this one program that we get right off the bat in CodingGround. We get the famous Hello World program. Again, it's not the most useful program in the world, but at least it gets us started. So we talked about our main method a little bit. Let me just talk about it again. Your main method is your entry point into your Java application. This is where everything starts. Now, if you start going on to other versions of Java or other flavors of Java, like if you're doing like cloud native stuff or server-side Java, if you still do that, there's other entry points that go into your Java program. But here we're writing just simple Java applications. So your main method is the method that starts your Java application. So before I start declaring variables, let me talk about what you see here. You see public static void, and then you also see strings. What this is saying is main is a public method. It's static, which means there's one per class, not one per instance. Now, if you're just starting with object-oriented programming, you're going to need to know that sooner or later, the difference between a class and an instance, probably a little bit sooner rather than later. But for today, you could ignore that. Just know that there's something called instances, and you could build instances of classes. I'll save that for a different lecture when we talk about object orientation or object-oriented languages. But static just means that there's one main method per class, not for instance. Take it on faith for now. Void means that this method doesn't return anything. Now you should know what that means, because all of you have experience at least with one third generation language and the main method. Now here's the deal about the main method. It's got to look exactly like this, meaning within its case sensitivity. It's got to be main with a capital M. And it also has to have this signature. It takes an array of strings. Now you put in the data type here, and then you put in the name of the data type. And when we got an open bracket, close bracket, that just means we have an array. So this takes an array of strings. Now the array of strings that is in the signature, or we're passing as an argument in the main method, means that at the command line, if we were running this like from a command prompt or from a terminal, and we're running this Java program called Hello World, we can pass in values. Now you might have seen that represented as the scanner class, where the scanner class can take in, standard and 1 and 2. But basically, this just means that we can take in an array of strings in the main method. All of this together is called the method signature. Now, your main method, again, is a special Java method or an automatic Java method that it automatically starts when we run the Java program. This is where all the magic starts happening. Now, if you go into Java, now I'm talking to those of you that are very new at this, okay? First of all, you're probably new to Java at least, because you're learning this. But if you're new to languages altogether or starting it, you're going to have to learn a little bit more about method signatures. But for now, your main method is where everything starts. Okay, more about methods in a second. Oh, for the sake of argument, I'm using the term method and function interchangeably. Now, later, when we start getting into more object orientation, I'm going to have to differentiate between that, because there is a difference. between a method and a function. But for now, let's use the term interchangeably. Some of you are looking at this, rolling your eyes, saying, well, that's going to reinforce a bad habit. Well, I'm kind of using the 80-20 rule here. I'm trying to just to get the main idea across about methods and signatures without going through all the conceptual OO hoops. So for those of you that know OO more than most people in the class, my apologies. I am kind of taking a happy path through this. Again, just to do the 90-10 or the 80-20 rule, just to kind of get the happy path to work here. All right, so we got hello world. We all know what that does. So let's declare two variables. Now, you declare variables in Java before you use them, and we're going to use the primitives. We're just going to use a primitive integer. Now, later, when we start working more with these, I'll give you some additional reading or some additional resources on the different types of Java variables. It doesn't really lend itself to me doing all of them on the overhead, because it's just, classes and overhead should be just recipes. This is how you do it. If you need to know how other variables work, look up the other ones. You don't need me to say, this is an integer, this is a long, this is a float, this is a single float. Maybe a little bit, but at the very beginning, no. So let's just put in an integer. Integer, remember, is a whole number. 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. It's not a fraction. Remember, fractions or real numbers are non-integral numbers. An integer, again, is a positive or a negative number. You could look up the range of it, too. We're going to use smaller ones, though, smaller numbers. And we're going to say integer, and we're going to put in, how about this? Li for local integer, num1. We're also going to put in int, li for local integer, num2. And we'll put the result as another integer. We'll put a result as another integer. Put in li result. Little dead air there. Sorry about that. Okay. So we declared 3 variables. For the sake of what we're doing tonight is all I want to do. You declare your variable, you put the data type, and you put the name of the variable. So that's it. Now, other than integer, like I said, there's different types of numbers we can use. You can look them up. But that's how you declare them. So I'm just going to do some math here. I'll say li result. Well, let's assign these. Put li num1 is equal to, oh, pardon me, it'd be my fault. Li result is equal to li num1 plus li num2. And we're going to have to assign these. So before I do that, and this needs to be a small e, for those of you raising your hand, I knew that. Let's assign these. We'll put li num1, pardon me, equals 34. And how about li num2 is equal to 50. So we'll do 34 plus 50. And we'll write this out to the command line, or to standard out, which here is going to be in this result portion. So rather than hello world, we're just going to put in the result. So I will say result equals and I'll append li result. All right, I'll give you guys a second to take a look at this. And again, at any time, feel free just to pause the video And when you pause the video, you can, take a closer look at this and maybe even ask a question or look something up. All right, there you go. So let's run. Hopefully we'll run okay. So I'm going to click on the execute button. Got an error there. We got, first of all, num2 needs a semicolon. Looks like an apostrophe there. For those of you that have reading glasses, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So it didn't like li num2, so let's try to execute it again. And we're getting closer. So li result should equal, you guys knew that, li num1 plus li num2. So let's run it. And there we go. We got result equals 84. All right, so let's sum this up. We declared 3 primitive variables. They're of the data type integer. Remember, integers are whole numbers. You can't use real ones. Real ones, again, have fractions or decimals. You can probably figure out how to use them, at least start learning how to use them, just basically on the example that we did. I'm assigning 2 variables on line 8 and line 9, 34 and 50. And then I'm assigning them into a result, and I'm printing out the result. Okay, so that's declaring variables. Now let's declare another method. Now since this is static, we're going to create another static method. Now methods or functions are like subroutines. Well, the subroutine's something different, but you can define our own methods to do something. Now usually what we do is you declare a method if you have some kind of functionality that you want to repeat. Like for example, rather than the main method, in this case, having hundreds or possibly thousands of lines of code, you could divide it into functions to actually break that functionality out. For example, what I'm going to do is after my main method is I'm going to declare another method called add numbers. So this would be a public static, and we'll put in void. It doesn't return anything. Now, our function can return something. Again, this isn't a comprehensive demonstration on functions. We can return something in our function. In this case, we're not going to. And we're going to say add numbers. Now, add numbers is going to have 2 arguments. Integer, we'll put an LA for local, for how about this? AI for argument integer, num1. Do this again, int. And we'll do LA num1, comma, int, LA num2. I'll leave it there for a second for you guys to catch up. And again, you can always pause the video if you like. So what add numbers is going to do is we're going to have add numbers add these numbers up for us. Now again, we have to put the functionality in. I'm just kind of cleaning up here a little bit. So I'm going to take this code and put it in into the function add numbers. So here in the main method, I'm just going to do the following. I'm just going to pass 2 numbers into add numbers. So I'll type in add numbers. And I'm going to put in 34 and 80. I'm just cleaning up here by getting rid of some blank space. You know what? Let me have at least one blank line. All right, so I got 2 numbers. I got 34 and 80. I'm passing them to add numbers here and here. And I don't think I even need these guys here. I'm just going to say li result equals la num1 plus la num2. Quite simple. It still does the same thing. It adds two numbers. That's all this function does, or this program does. But we're just breaking it into a function now. So the main method calls add numbers. We're passing in 34 and 80. So add numbers gets fired. It takes 34 and 80, puts it to a local integer called li result, and it prints it out. All right, so let's see if this runs and works as advertised. And it does. So here we got 114. I think before I was taking 34 and adding it to 50. So here I'm taking 34, adding it to 80, and I'm getting 114. So this works just fine. Now, I'm going to wrap this up here because I really just wanted to give you the happy path. And I always say happy path, meaning that, this is the guided tour where we didn't take too many hard looks to the left or the right, because it's not as easy as this. There's a lot that I left out, but that's okay. That's okay. I want you to at least see this because most of you are seeing this kind of for the first time. So I want you to see how this actually works when we could actually define a method in a program and then call it. Now, this is going to become helpful, especially if you're going to go into other languages, like I mentioned. If you're going to go into, pick one, Ruby, Perl, PowerShell, anything that supports writing methods. And you could go back to some languages from the 50s and the 60s. Every program has methods that you can call in it. So, again, I'm assuming that you're kind of a beginner at this point or towards the beginning part of the spectrum. And I'm just kind of getting your feet wet in declaring methods, calling methods, and passing values into methods. So that's all I had today on our lesson of writing a simple Java program, simple declaring variables without going into a lot of detail on the types of variables, that you can create and the different ranges of them. And second thing that we did is I showed you how you could create a function and then call the function. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.